Story 1. It was a quiet summer afternoon when the mysterious package arrived at the Miller residence. 8-year-old Sophie discovered it on the front porch, wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. There was no return address, only her name written in a delicate, looping script. "Mom, look what I found!" Sophie shouted as she burst into the kitchen, where her mother, Laura, was busy preparing dinner. "Can I open it?" Laura glanced at the package and then at Sophie, her curiosity piqued. "All right, but be careful," she said, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Sophie eagerly tore open the wrapping, revealing a vintage teddy bear. It had a faded brown coat, one of its button eyes was hanging by a thread, and its smile seemed almost too wide. Around its neck was a tag that read, "I will always be your friend." "What an odd-looking bear," Laura remarked. "Where did it come from?" "I don't know, but I love it," Sophie declared, clutching the bear to her chest. She decided to name it Mr. Fuzzy. From the moment Sophie brought Mr. Fuzzy into the house, strange things began to happen. Sophie's behavior changed almost overnight. She became more withdrawn and prone to mood swings. She insisted on carrying the bear everywhere and refused to let anyone else touch it. Laura and her husband, Tom, noticed Sophie's sudden attachment to the bear but chalked it up to her adjusting to the idea of growing up. However, they couldn't ignore the odd occurrences that started to plague their home. One evening, as Laura was tucking Sophie into bed, she heard soft whispering. At first, she thought Sophie was talking to herself, but when she stepped closer, she realized the whispers were coming from Mr. Fuzzy. "Sophie, who are you talking to?" Laura asked, her voice tinged with concern. "Mr. Fuzzy," Sophie replied simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "He tells me things." A chill ran down Laura's spine. "What kind of things?" "Secrets," Sophie whispered, her eyes wide and serious. "He says he's my best friend." As days turned into weeks, the disturbances grew more pronounced. Sophie often woke up screaming from nightmares, claiming that Mr. Fuzzy showed her terrible things. Objects around the house began to move on their own, and Laura and Tom could no longer deny that something was terribly wrong. One night, Tom was woken by the sound of footsteps. He got out of bed and followed the noise to Sophie's room. There, he found Sophie standing in the middle of the room, staring blankly at the wall with Mr. Fuzzy clutched in her arms. "Sophie, are you all right?" Tom asked, placing a hand on her shoulder. Sophie turned to him, her eyes vacant. "He says you're in danger, Daddy. He says we all are." Tom felt a knot of fear tighten in his stomach. "Who says that?" "Mr. Fuzzy," Sophie replied, her voice almost robotic. "He knows everything." Desperate for answers, Laura and Tom began to research the origins of the bear. They found an old antiques dealer who recognized it immediately. "This bear," the dealer said, his voice low and somber, "it's cursed. It was made by a toymaker who was rumored to practice dark magic. The bear was intended to be a conduit for his malevolent spirit. Every family that has owned it has faced tragedy." Horrified, Laura and Tom realized they needed to do something before it was too late. They reached out to Claire, a paranormal investigator known for dealing with cursed objects. Claire arrived at the house with a sense of urgency, bringing with her an array of tools and charms. Claire explained that they needed to perform a cleansing ritual to banish the spirit from the bear. She warned them that the process could be dangerous and that they needed to be prepared for anything. As they began the ritual, the atmosphere in the house grew increasingly oppressive. Claire chanted incantations while sprinkling salt and burning sage. The bear began to shake violently, its button eyes glowing a sinister red. Sophie, watching from the doorway, started to scream. "It's hurting him." "Stop," she cried, rushing towards Mr. Fuzzy. Laura held Sophie back as Claire continued, her voice growing louder and more commanding. The bear's shaking intensified, and a shadowy figure began to rise from it, writhing and twisting in the air. The room filled with a deafening roar as the figure struggled against the ritual's power. With a final, powerful chant, the shadowy figure let out a blood-curdling scream and dissipated into the air, leaving the bear lifeless on the floor. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, and the house seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief. Chapter 6: The Aftermath. Sophie's demeanor improved almost immediately. She no longer had nightmares, and the strange occurrences ceased. Laura and Tom were relieved, but they couldn't shake the feeling of unease whenever they looked at Mr. Fuzzy. Determined to be rid of the cursed object once and for all, they decided to burn the bear. They watched as the flames consumed it, the fire crackling and hissing as if it were alive. When nothing was left but ash, they finally felt a sense of closure. Months passed, and the family began to heal. Sophie was her cheerful self again, and the house felt like a home once more. However, the memory of the haunted bear lingered in the back of their minds. One sunny afternoon, Sophie was playing in the yard when she found something half buried in the dirt. She pulled it out, revealing a small, charred teddy bear. Its button eyes glinted in the sunlight, and around its neck was a tag that read, "I will always be your friend." Sophie stared at the bear, a sense of dread washing over her. She dropped it and ran to her mother, her heart pounding in her chest. "Mommy, it's back," she whispered, her voice trembling. Laura looked at the bear, her face pale. She picked it up and held it at arm's length, as if it might come to life at any moment. "We need to leave this place," Laura said, her voice resolute. "We need to get as far away from here as possible." That night, as they packed their belongings, the house seemed to come alive with shadows and whispers. The family drove away, leaving the farmhouse and its dark history behind. As they disappeared into the distance, the bear sat quietly in the yard, its button eyes watching. And in the stillness of the night, a faint whisper could be heard, "I will always be your friend." Story 2. The Johnson family lived in a picturesque suburban neighborhood, where life was serene until the night their 6-year-old son, Timmy, vanished without a trace. The community rallied around them, and the police conducted a thorough investigation, but as days turned into weeks and then months, hope began to fade. A year later, as the weight of their loss still bore heavily on their hearts, an unexpected package arrived at their doorstep, addressed to their 5-year-old daughter, Lily. The brown paper package bore no return address, only Lily's name in a delicate, looping script. "Mommy, look!" Lily exclaimed as she ran into the house with the package. "It's for me." "Be careful, honey," said Linda, her mother, her voice tinged with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Lily tore open the package to reveal an old, worn teddy bear. It had matted fur and an unsettling smile stitched onto its face. A note was attached, written in a childish scrawl, "For Lily, with love, from Timmy." Linda felt a chill run down her spine. Who would send this, she wondered aloud. "Maybe it's from Timmy," Lily said innocently, hugging the bear tightly. Linda's heart ached. She showed the note to her husband, Mark, who was equally baffled and disturbed. "That's impossible," Mark said, his voice heavy with sorrow. "It has to be a cruel joke." Lily, enamored with the bear, named it Mr. Whispers. She insisted on taking it everywhere and even made a special spot for it on her bed. That night, as Linda was tucking her into bed, she heard Lily talking softly. "What are you doing, sweetie?" Linda asked. "Talking to Mr. Whispers," Lily replied, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "He says Timmy's still here." Linda's blood ran cold. "Honey, you know Timmy's gone." Lily looked up with wide, earnest eyes. "Mr. Whispers says he's not gone, Mommy. He says Timmy's waiting for us." Linda kissed Lily goodnight, trying to dismiss the unsettling feeling gnawing at her. She convinced herself it was Lily's way of coping with her brother's disappearance. From that night on, strange things began to happen. Lily would often wake in the middle of the night, giggling and whispering to Mr. Whispers. When Linda asked what she was talking about, Lily would simply say, "Mr. Whispers is telling me secrets." The house itself seemed to change. Shadows danced along the walls, and the air grew thick with a sense of unease. Mark found it unnerving, but Linda tried to brush it off as their grief playing tricks on their minds. One night, Linda was jolted awake by the sound of soft footsteps in the hallway. She got up to investigate and found Lily standing outside Timmy's old room, clutching Mr. Whispers. "Lily, what are you doing out here?" Linda asked, her voice trembling. "Timmy wants to come back," Lily said in a sing-song voice, her eyes focused on the closed door. "Mr. Whispers says we need to help him." Desperate for answers, Linda decided to research the bear. She spent hours scouring the internet and eventually stumbled upon a local historian, Mrs. Hawthorne, who had extensive knowledge of the area's history and folklore. Linda reached out to her, and Mrs. Hawthorne agreed to visit their home. Mrs. Hawthorne was an elderly woman with a sharp mind and an air of mystery. She examined Mr. Whispers carefully, her face growing more serious by the minute. "This bear is old, very old," she said. "It's part of a limited series made by a toymaker named Elias Granger in the early 1900s. Granger was rumored to have delved into dark arts. Each bear was said to be imbued with the spirit of a lost child, waiting to be reunited with their family." Linda felt a wave of nausea. "What can we do? How do we help Timmy?" Mrs. Hawthorne's expression softened with pity. "There is a way to contact the spirit bound to the bear. But it is dangerous and must be done with utmost care." That night, Mrs. Hawthorne set up a séance in the living room. She instructed Linda and Mark to sit in a circle with Lily and Mr. Whispers in the center. The atmosphere was thick with tension as Mrs. Hawthorne began to chant, her voice low and melodic. As the séance progressed, the temperature in the room dropped dramatically. A faint whispering filled the air, growing louder and more insistent. The lights flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Suddenly, a dark, shadowy figure materialized, slowly taking the shape of a small boy. "Timmy?" Linda whispered, tears streaming down her face. The figure nodded, its form wavering. "Mommy, I'm scared." Linda reached out instinctively, but Mrs. Hawthorne stopped her. "We need to finish the ritual," she warned. "Otherwise, his spirit could be trapped forever." The chanting grew louder, almost deafening, and the shadowy figure began to solidify. The room filled with a blinding light, and then, just as quickly, it was gone. Timmy stood in the center of the circle, looking exactly as he had the day he disappeared. Linda and Mark rushed to Timmy, enveloping him in their arms. "Timmy, is it really you?" Linda asked, her voice choked with emotion. Timmy nodded, smiling through tears. "I missed you, Mommy." Lily stood off to the side, clutching Mr. Whispers, her face serene. "I told you Timmy was waiting," she said softly. Mrs. Hawthorne watched the reunion with a mixture of relief and sadness. He's back, but this isn't the end. The bear will seek another child if it isn't dealt with properly. Mrs. Hawthorne explained that Mr. Whispers needed to be destroyed to prevent another family from suffering the same fate. They decided to burn the bear, hoping to put an end to the curse once and for all. The family gathered in the backyard as Mrs. Hawthorne built a small pyre. As the flames consumed Mr. Whispers, a wailing sound echoed through the night, and the bear's eyes glowed one last time before disintegrating into ash. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, and for the first time in over a year, the Johnsons felt a sense of peace. With Timmy back, the family began to heal. They moved away from the house that had brought them so much pain, determined to start fresh. They never forgot the eerie events that led to Timmy's return, but they were grateful to have their son back. Years later, as they were unpacking in their new home, Lily found an old, dusty box in the attic. She opened it to reveal a familiar teddy bear, its button eyes staring up at her. Lily gasped and dropped the bear, her heart pounding. "Mommy, it's him," she whispered, her voice trembling. Linda and Mark rushed to her side, their faces pale. They looked at the bear in horror, realizing that the curse might never truly be broken. As they stared at the bear, a soft whisper filled the air, "I will always be your friend." Story 3. The Parker family had recently moved into a picturesque old farmhouse on the outskirts of a small town. The house, with its creaky floors and vine-covered walls, had a rustic charm that drew them in despite its age. 12-year-old Jake was especially thrilled about his new room, which was tucked away in the attic, offering him a sense of adventure and privacy. While unpacking, Jake stumbled upon an old, dusty box in the far corner of his attic room. Curiosity piqued, he opened it and found a vintage teddy bear inside. The bear had a worn, faded coat, and one of its eyes was missing, replaced by a crude stitch. Despite its shabby appearance, Jake felt an inexplicable connection to the bear and decided to keep it, naming it Patch. The first night in his new room, Jake placed Patch on a chair by his bed. Exhausted from the day's activities, he fell asleep quickly. However, in the middle of the night, he was awakened by faint whispering. Groggy and disoriented, Jake sat up and strained to listen. The whispers seemed to be coming from the direction of the chair where Patch sat. "Who's there?" Jake called out, his voice barely above a whisper. There was no response, only the soft rustling of leaves outside. He dismissed it as his imagination and tried to go back to sleep. But the whispers continued every night, always faint and unintelligible, making his sleep restless and fragmented. As the days passed, Jake's initial excitement about his new room began to wane, replaced by a growing sense of unease. One rainy afternoon, with nothing better to do, Jake decided to explore the attic further. While rummaging through old boxes, he discovered a small, leather-bound journal hidden behind a loose floorboard. The journal belonged to a boy named Samuel who had lived in the house over a century ago. The entries detailed Samuel's life and his unusual relationship with a teddy bear named Patch. As Jake read on, he found passages describing eerie occurrences remarkably similar to his own experiences, whispers in the night, objects moving on their own, and a persistent feeling of being watched. "Patch isn't just a toy," one entry read. "He's a guardian, but also a key to something hidden." Determined to uncover the truth, Jake decided to dig deeper. He realized that the journal might hold the key to understanding Patch's true nature. The journal hinted at a hidden room somewhere in the attic, a place where Samuel had spent much of his time. Jake searched tirelessly, his heart racing with anticipation. After hours of scouring the attic, he finally discovered a concealed door behind a large wardrobe. With effort, he managed to open it, revealing a small, dusty room filled with old books, drawings, and a wooden chest. Inside the chest, he found a delicate, hand-carved key in a note from Samuel. The key to the past, present, and future lies within Patch. Trust him, and you will find the truth. That night, Jake placed the key next to Patch before going to bed. The whispers grew louder and more distinct but still incomprehensible. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, Jake decided to confront the bear directly. "Patch," Jake whispered, clutching the bear tightly. "What do you want from me?" The room grew colder, and the whispers coalesced into a single, clear voice. "Help me." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "Help you? How?" "Find the hidden book," the voice continued. "In the room, under the floorboards." Summoning his courage, Jake returned to the hidden room and pried up the floorboards. There, he found a leather-bound book with strange symbols on the cover. As he opened it, the air grew heavy, and a spectral figure of a young boy appeared before him. "Samuel?" Jake asked, his voice trembling. The figure nodded. "Thank you for finding my journal and the book. I was trapped, and Patch has been my only connection to this world." Samuel explained that the book contained a spell that bound his spirit to Patch. He had discovered the book in the hidden room and, in his curiosity, had accidentally bound himself to the bear. The only way to free his spirit was to perform the counterspell, something he had been unable to do before his untimely death. Determined to help, Jake studied the book carefully. That night, under Samuel's guidance, he performed the counterspell. The room filled with a blinding light, and Patch began to tremble. With a final whispered, "Thank you," Samuel's spirit was released, and Patch fell limp in Jake's hands. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, and the house felt warm and welcoming for the first time since they moved in. Jake shared the entire experience with his parents, who were skeptical but supportive. They decided to leave the hidden room as it was, a tribute to Samuel's memory. In the days that followed, Jake felt a profound sense of peace. The whispers ceased, and he no longer felt the eerie presence that had haunted him. Patch, now just a regular teddy bear, sat quietly on a shelf in Jake's room. As time passed, the family settled into their new home. The strange events became a distant memory, and life returned to normal. However, Jake never forgot Samuel or the night he freed his spirit. Years later, Jake returned to the farmhouse with his own family. As he showed his children around, he shared the story of Patch and the hidden room. They listened in awe, fascinated by the tale of the guardian bear and the boy who had lived there long ago. One evening, as Jake was tucking his children into bed, his daughter held up Patch and asked, "Daddy, do you think there are more secrets to discover?" Jake smiled, a twinkle in his eye. "Maybe, sweetheart. The past has a way of revealing itself when we least expect it." As he closed the door to his children's room, he thought he heard a faint whisper. He paused, listening closely. But the house was silent, save for the gentle creaking of the old beams. With a chuckle, Jake turned away, convinced it was just his imagination. Little did he know, the story of Patch was far from over, and the secrets of the old farmhouse still lingered in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered by those brave enough to listen. Story 4. In the quiet town of Willow Creek, nestled among the whispering pines, the Smith family moved into an old Victorian house with a dark history. As they settled into their new home, strange occurrences began to unfold. One evening, as the family gathered in the living room, they heard a soft knock at the door. Mrs. Smith opened it to find a package sitting on the doorstep, wrapped in tattered cloth and tied with frayed twine. There was no return address, only the name Emily scrawled across it in faded ink. Curiosity piqued, they brought the package inside and unwrapped it to reveal a vintage teddy bear. Its once vibrant fur was now matted and discolored, and its button eyes seemed to follow them with an unsettling gaze. Little Emily, the youngest of the Smith children, took an instant liking to the bear and decided to call it Whisper. But as night fell and darkness enveloped the house, Whisper's true nature began to reveal itself. That first night, Emily woke to the sound of soft whispers emanating from her closet. She rubbed her eyes and peered into the darkness, her heart racing with fear. To her horror, she saw Whisper sitting on her toy chest, its button eyes gleaming in the moonlight. "Who's there?" Emily whispered, her voice trembling. But there was no response, only the sound of whispers growing louder and more insistent. Emily pulled the covers over her head and tried to block out the noise, but the whispers continued to echo in her ears. The next morning, Emily told her family about the strange encounter, but they dismissed it as a bad dream. However, as the nights went on, the whispers grew louder, and Emily's fear intensified. As the days turned into weeks, the Smiths began to experience other unsettling phenomena. Objects moved on their own, strange shadows danced along the walls, and Emily started having vivid nightmares. One night, Mrs. Smith woke to the sound of Emily talking in her sleep. She rushed to her daughter's room and found her sitting up in bed, clutching Whisper tightly. "Emily, what's wrong?" Mrs. Smith asked, her voice filled with concern. Emily turned to her mother, her eyes wide with fear. "Whisper talks to me at night," she whispered. "He tells me things, scary things." Mrs. Smith's blood ran cold as she listened to her daughter's words. She reached for the bear, but Emily clung to it tightly, refusing to let go. Mrs. Smith knew then that something was terribly wrong with Whisper, but she had no idea how to fix it. Determined to uncover the truth, Mr. Smith delved into the history of their new home. He discovered that it had once belonged to a wealthy family who had mysteriously disappeared under strange circumstances. Legend had it that the youngest daughter of the family, a girl named Lily, had possessed a beloved teddy bear that she carried with her everywhere. The bear, it was said, had been a gift from a mysterious stranger who had visited the family shortly before their disappearance. Mr. Smith's research led him to a hidden room in the attic, filled with dusty old books and arcane artifacts. Among them, he found a journal belonging to Lily, detailing her experiences with the bear and the strange occurrences that plagued the house. Armed with this newfound knowledge, the Smiths realized that Whisper was no ordinary teddy bear. It was a vessel for a malevolent spirit, trapped within its plush confines and seeking to unleash its wrath upon the living. They knew they had to act fast to rid their home of the curse once and for all. With the help of a local medium, they performed a seance to communicate with the spirit bound to Whisper. As they gathered around the table, the atmosphere grew thick with tension. The medium chanted incantations, her voice low and melodic, as the room filled with an otherworldly energy. Suddenly, a dark, shadowy figure emerged from Whisper, its eyes burning with hatred. It spoke in a voice that chilled them to the bone, promising vengeance upon all who dared to cross its path. Undeterred, the Smiths confronted the spirit head-on, armed with ancient charms and protective talismans. They chanted incantations of their own, their voices blending together in a powerful cacophony. As they did, the air crackled with energy, and Whisper began to thrash about violently. The spirit fought back with all its might, lashing out with tendrils of darkness that threatened to engulf them. But the Smiths stood their ground, their resolve unshakable. With one final burst of energy, they unleashed a wave of pure light that engulfed the spirit and banished it from their home forever. As the light faded, Whisper fell limp in Emily's arms, its cursed essence finally vanquished. The house was quiet once more, save for the sound of the family's relieved sighs. In the aftermath of the ordeal, the Smiths moved on with their lives, grateful to have escaped the clutches of the cursed teddy bear. They buried Whisper deep in the woods, far from civilization, hoping to seal away its dark power for eternity. But as they drove away from the secluded spot, they couldn't shake the feeling of unease that lingered in the air. They knew that the darkness they had faced was not easily forgotten and that Whisper's malevolent spirit might still lurk in the shadows, waiting for its next victim. And as the moon cast its eerie glow over the sleeping town of Willow Creek, a faint whisper could be heard on the wind, a haunting reminder of the horrors that had unfolded in the house on the hill. Story 5. In the remote village of Oakwood, nestled deep within the forest, the Brown family moved into a secluded cottage. The cottage had stood vacant for years, shrouded in mystery and whispers of a tragic past. One stormy night, a package arrived at their doorstep, wrapped in old, tattered cloth. Intrigued, Mr. and Mrs. Parker opened it to reveal a vintage teddy bear. Its once plush fur was now matted and discolored, and its button eyes seemed to hold a glimmer of malevolence. Their daughter, Lily, was drawn to the bear immediately, despite its eerie appearance. She decided to name it Whispers, unaware of the darkness that lay within. As the days passed, strange occurrences began to unfold in the cottage. Objects moved on their own, shadows danced along the walls, and Lily started having terrifying nightmares. One night, Mrs. Parker woke to the sound of Lily talking in her sleep. Alarmed, she rushed to her daughter's room and found her sitting up in bed, whispering to Whispers. "Who are you talking to, Lily?" Mrs. Parker asked, her voice filled with concern. Lily turned to her mother, her eyes wide with fear. "Whispers," she whispered. "He speaks to me at night. He knows things." Mrs. Parker felt a chill run down her spine as she listened to her daughter's words. She reached for the bear, but Lily clung to it tightly, refusing to let go. Mrs. Parker knew then that something was terribly wrong with Whispers, but she had no idea how to fix it. Determined to uncover the truth, Mr. Parker delved into the history of their cottage. He discovered that it had once been the home of a reclusive toymaker named Elijah Blackwood, who had a reputation for dabbling in the occult. Legend had it that Blackwood had created a series of cursed toys imbued with dark magic, which he sold to unsuspecting customers. The toys were said to be possessed by vengeful spirits, seeking retribution for past wrongs. Mr. Parker's research led him to a hidden room beneath the cottage, filled with dusty old tomes and arcane artifacts. Among them, he found a journal belonging to Blackwood, detailing his experiments with dark magic and the creation of his cursed toys. As the days went on, the haunting in the cottage intensified. Lily's nightmares grew more vivid, and the air seemed to thicken with an oppressive sense of dread. One night, as the family gathered around the fireplace, a cold wind swept through the cottage, extinguishing the flames. A voice echoed through the darkness, chilling them to the bone. "I am the spirit of Elijah Blackwood," the voice hissed. "And I will not rest until I reclaim what is mine." Terrified, the Parkers realized that Whispers was no ordinary teddy bear. It was a vessel for Blackwood's malevolent spirit, trapped within its plush confines and seeking revenge on the living. Desperate to rid their home of the cursed bear, the Parkers sought out the help of a local medium. Together, they performed a ritual to banish the spirit from Whispers and send it back to the depths of the beyond. As they gathered around the bear, the medium chanted incantations in a language long forgotten. The air crackled with energy, and Whispers began to thrash about violently, its button eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. But the spirit fought back with all its might, lashing out with tendrils of darkness that threatened to engulf them. The Parkers pressed on, their voices rising in a chorus of defiance against the darkness. With one final burst of energy, the medium unleashed a wave of pure light that engulfed Whispers and banished the spirit from its cursed vessel. The cottage was filled with blinding light, and then, as quickly as it had begun, it was over. Lily clutched Whispers tightly, tears streaming down her face. But instead of fear, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. The darkness that had plagued their home was gone, replaced by a comforting warmth. In the aftermath of the ordeal, the Parkers decided to leave the cottage behind and start fresh elsewhere. They buried Whispers deep in the forest, far from civilization, hoping to seal away its dark power for eternity. As they drove away from the secluded spot, they couldn't shake the feeling of unease that lingered in the air. They knew that the darkness they had faced was not easily forgotten and that Blackwood's malevolent spirit might still lurk in the shadows, waiting for its next victim. And as they disappeared into the night, a faint whisper could be heard on the wind, a haunting reminder of the horrors that had unfolded in the cottage in the woods.